Thank you for auditing the always positive new music review show hosted by a French professor who wasn't going to do another video this week. The next video is supposed to be my year-end stampies, my year-end in review, and I'll probably do that tomorrow, maybe on a live stream. But I had to review this new album by your Old Droog, The Shining. And, you know, it's supposed to be the end of the year. We're not supposed to get new music. But I was powerless. And I need to review this album. I need to talk about it. And that's a little bit tough because your Old Droog, I'm fairly new to his catalog. I've only started reviewing him in the last year, but I think he's released 4 EPs in that time. And I reviewed the first 2, I skipped the third, and I'm now on to the 4th. And the reason I skipped the third is I'm running out of things to say. That is not to say that he's boring. He's not. He is just extremely consistent. I mean, a truly admirable consistency. And this is a thing that we're seeing a lot in this underground movement that's happening, where we have artists who dump music, meaning they release a lot of music. But, like, none of it's bad quality. You know, we see the same thing with Griselda, where it's just like they keep releasing new music and it keeps being good. But for a music reviewer like me, it's tough because what more do I say about your Old Droog? His rhymes are stupid. They're so good. He has so many interesting, clever references that's mixed in with a sort of personal confessional tone that just sets the perfect balance between sort of nerdy and street. His flow is really good, and especially if you pay attention to it, you realize how well worked his rhymes are. His beat selection is outstanding. Every single beat works with his voice. I don't know where all these producers come from, but it all works perfectly. So I didn't review The Oddfather, his last album, because it's like, I'm just going to say the same thing I said about the last 2. And this is not a criticism, this is praise. But it makes my job hard. Fortunately, I was compelled to review The Shining for 2 reasons. One is the cover, and the other is a specific lyric. Let's talk about the cover first. You might not know this about me, but The Shining is my favorite movie. And it's not even close. I mean, even though I'm the world's biggest Chewbacca collector, it's true, Star Wars is not my favorite movie. The Shining is my favorite movie. And on the one hand, that's a very intellectual choice. Obviously, Kubrick is a great filmmaker. I love the details. I love the way it's filmed. But it's actually a personal reason. I really relate to the movie. In a lot of ways, my upbringing resembled The Shining. Okay, I know that sounds terrible, but it's true. Like, maybe on my secondary channel, I'll do a video someday about why do I like The Shining so much. But I've seen The Shining more than I've seen any other movie. I've watched it so many times. I've watched every documentary. I've watched every stupid YouTube video about it. I've listened to the entire 237 podcast, which I'll talk about. And I love this movie more than anything. And when your Old Droog releases an album called The Shining, I am not anticipating this cover. Now, I made a meme this morning. Good for me. Look at me. I might be a Generation Xer, but I can make memes. This is the small brain to big brain meme. If you're not familiar with the format, you talk about something as being sort of, you know, like the simple beginning level of something until you get to the bottom where it's the big brain and your brain is exploding because it's so smart. So I'm going to do that for this question. What is scary in The Shining? Because everybody loves The Shining, but everybody loves it at different levels. And that's not to insult you. If you have a surface level love of The Shining, that's fine. Okay? And so, like, you know, the small brain, what's scary in The Shining is, ooh, Jack is showing up and he's breaking down the door. Okay? Like reducing The Shining to a boogeyman story, a cabin fever story. Okay? So that's the small brain, what's scary in The Shining. If you ask most people what is the scariest thing in The Shining, they will say the 2 twins. And that makes sense. You know, when I was a kid, before I really understood the movie that well, that's definitely what scared me the most. But, you know, that's played out. People dress up as that for Halloween and Halloween costumes. The sisters who play the twins, they're always signing at conventions. The next level up is this image. If you don't remember this is when Wendy is running around The Shining and there's all these ghosts and she looks down the hall and she sees what appears to be a man in a tuxedo giving head to a man in what appears to be a bear costume. This scared me so much in high school that I actually got the VHS and I paused it on this scene, and I just looked at it for 5 minutes until I was no longer scared. I didn't understand, but I was terrified. When later I was in France and I saw this movie book, and I bought this movie book just because this cover was so good. All right? It's part of the uncanny nature of The Shining. It's that deeper level of like, wait, what? Just his ability to get under your skin and mess with your brain. But what is the real big brain scariest thing in The Shining? What is actually the most terrifying thing about this amazing movie? It's that scene. It's Shelley Duvall with her cigarette that she has not ashed. That is the scariest scene. Why is that the scariest scene? That's where she's talking to the doctor. And this is before they've even gone to the Overlook Hotel. And she's talking to the doctor about Danny's medical history. And she's saying how he had an injury. And she doesn't want to say why. And so the doctor asks, what was the injury? Oh, he dislocated his shoulder. Oh, how did that happen? And then she smiles. And that's what it is here. This is her smiling with that unashed cigarette. You just want her to ash, but she won't ash. And that's why Kubrick's a genius, okay? It's because you want the cigarette to ash. Oh, it's one of those things. And what was that one of those things? His father came home and broke his shoulder, yelled at him and beat him and abused him. This is the scariest scene because, realistically, The Shining is about generational abuse. That's how I've come to understand it as an adult. And this terrible, like, what's that term they use? Alcoholics have the codependent relation. Enable. This is the image of the enabling of abuse. Of her accepting him how he is and not running away. The Shining starts here when she agrees to go away with an abusive alcoholic who hasn't really done what he needs to do to be better. So why did I have to review this? It's partly because showing this scares me more than the two twins. This is what The Shining is about. At least to me, now that I'm an adult, now that I have kids, now that I understand life better. The other reason, okay, even then I was quite busy, so I didn't think I was going to get to it. But I was driving my son to get his allergy shots, and we were listening to the album. You know, my son has liked everything he's heard from your Old Droog, and I heard this one line. I put your face on a T like the Shining logo. And this is where I stopped. Like, I stopped the car. We were outside of a Dunkin' Donuts. I stopped the car across the street from Burger King, if you know Rochester. That intersection. Anyways, I couldn't believe how smart of a line that is. Because if you're like me and you've been trying to think about, like, should I get a Shining poster? If I say, what is the Shining poster? You're probably picturing Jack. You're probably picturing maybe the girls, maybe the hotel. You're probably picturing the Here's Johnny scene. Do you want to see the original poster for The Shining that came out that was preparing the world? It was this. Let me zoom in. It was this weird face done by Saul Bass, the very famous poster maker who made, the Vertigo poster, like the best poster maker of all time. And he made this kind of underwhelming image of the Shining poster. That's my dog, Toby. Toby! Don't make me correct you! Knock it off! Toby? Toby! You can't even see out there. The blinds are drawn. It's kind of an underwhelming poster. Like, I didn't buy one because it's not that cool looking. But this idea, putting your face on a T, that's a traditional way of rappers talking about killing you, saying that they will make a memorial t-shirt with your face on it. So, put your face on a T like the Shining logo. It shows such a deep understanding of The Shining and its promotional material, and that follows all the way through the entire album. He's not just saying, oh, The Shining. He's actually able to weave it in at many, many different levels. Before going on, I do just want to give a small shout out. If you are a big Shining fan like I am, www.theshining237.com. I'm not sponsored by them. I've just listened to it by Susan Tekla Kruglinska, where she goes through every 2 minutes and 37 seconds of The Shining, kind of like minute by minute. And it's very good. And if you enjoy The Shining as much as I do, like I've listened to it like 1.5 times because I just enjoy thinking about the perfection of the movie. So check it out if you haven't. So let's get back to a review of this amazing album. You know, it's not going to make it onto my Stampies, best albums of the year. And not just because it's too late, because Little Sims made it on there, spoiler, but because it's this whole problem of the consistency. It's like everything your Old Droog does is so good that I can't pick between them, and then they all it's like when an actor gets nominated for 2 Oscars in the same year, and like they're not going to win one. You know what I mean? Anyways, let's get through the album track by track. The opening track, Fresh and Direct. I'll make that a stamp. It doesn't really matter what I use as a stamp because all the songs are consistently good. But great kind of drums and piano sound like they're warming up. A great underwater beat. All the beats on this album are very kind of laid back, matching his voice. Kind of warbled. I suppose the term the kids use these days is wavy. Kind of a wavy, warbled beat made by someone named Wino Willie, who does most of the production on here. I've reviewed some other songs by him or her as well. It's quite good. You might be Willie like Temple of Doom. Has your Old Droog done a Temple of Doom album yet? Temple of Droog? Indiana Jones and the Temple of Droog? I just gave that to him. Damn. I think Willie is the name of the woman in the movie, right? Because you got Short Round and Willie. Anyways, this is a great example of the mixture between his very clever lines and his personal side. So a lot of it's about growing up poor, all centered around food. We talk a lot about the food desert. So if you study inequality in America, in particular, you can tell the nature of inequality by the kind of access to food that is had by the people at the lower ends of society. It's not like that in the rest of the world, right? I mean, my wife grew up in Yugoslavia, then became Serbia, didn't have a lot of money, but she ate all this great food because the farmers were right over there, and it was a lot cheaper to get a fresh peach than it was to get a peach that cost $3 that was imported from somewhere else, right? So in most of the world, the poor don't necessarily eat bad processed food. They might not eat much, but in America, they eat bad processed food. That's why it's, instead of having grocery stores, there's the bodegas. And so he has all these references, like honey buns and powdered donuts. The chick stays in her bag like Utz. So Utz is a brand of potato chips that are mostly in New York, and there's a girl on the bag. So like girl on the bag like Utz, like this kind of just super deep level, like super deep references. And every time he drops one of these references, it makes me realize there's probably 3 others that I am not picking up. Like I picked up on this one, but I might not pick up on the others. He goes on to talk about how he remembers when you could buy 4 bags of chips for 4 quarters. I actually remember that as well. And he goes through each kind of bag, each kind of chips that he has, down to the cheese doodles and the Y's. It's very evocative. And then these funny lines like, Future, I've been working to get my people out the dungeon. Only because I've recently been researching the history of rap in Atlanta do I know that, much like Outkast, Future started in Rico Wise's sort of recording studio and practice space, the dungeon, in Atlanta. Again, one of these kinds of lines which I might have easily missed. And then all these like funny lines, Now I'm hard to see like Spotify dough. By the way, your Old Droog does not allow his lyrics to be reproduced. The Makami does the same thing. I don't like it, though. I understand why Makami does it, because he's the most mysterious man in hip-hop, and it's part of his whole shtick. It's like, you can't see him, you don't know his real name, you don't know what he's saying, you don't know what language he's in, you just don't know anything that's going on. Like, that's the fun of Makami. But your Old Droog, come on, man. Your lines are so good. Like, give people a chance. I'm hard to see, like, Spotify dough still bumping at the function like Cotton Eye Joe. Come on. Bumping at the function? This is what I'm talking about. Like, it's so clever that you're thinking about how it's really smart, that you can't see Spotify dough. Because if Spotify doesn't pay anybody anything, right? You don't get any money unless you're Taylor Swift, right? but like still bumping at the function, like Cotton Eye Joe. And like Cotton Eye Joe is a song which is played all the time, makes all this money. It's always played at functions. Like this is that big braininess of your Old Droog is, it's like functions. Like where do you hear Cotton Eye Joe? At functions, like birthday parties, bad weddings, hockey games. Canadians love that song. Still, it makes reference to Nicky Santoro and Casino, which is just fun. I always like references to Casino. Maybe this isn't the best example song, but really you should just listen to the whole thing. It's like 20 minutes. Next song is Brinks Truck. Starts off with like these beeps, like from a truck beeping up. Cool kind of detuned guitars, once again by Wino Willie. Here most of the references are video game related, so it's like she's got a lot of kicks like Chun-Li, and then he calls himself like a large Slavic like Zangief. So that's a reference to two characters from the video game Street Fighter 2. And then later he talks about Sub-Zero, and I'm calling whack. I'm sorry. I am doing nothing but praising your Old Droog on this album, but I'm calling whack on that. I'm also inventing that term, calling whack. Because Sub-Zero is from Mortal Kombat, so you can't have like multiple good references to Street Fighter 2, and then mix me up and go Mortal Kombat. They're totally different fighting games. Like I can't, like what's next? I'm gonna like zap you like Kilgore or something. What's that guy? What's that guy from Tekken? The weird guy looks like a ghost. Like just keep your video game straight. I call whack, but still great song. More great lines. What you were on the John like Yoko Ono. That has the put your face on a tea like a shining logo. And as always, part of what I like about your Old Droog is how food centric he is. He is Slavic, and just secretly, Slavs are like the most food appreciating culture in the world. You'd think it's the French. Nope, it's the Slavs. Like Wellington, I choose bread over beef. He's talking about beef Wellington, which is a way of eating beef with like puff pastry over it. It's just, come on, your Old Droog. You have to, in order to understand everything he's saying, you have to be a complete nerd. You have to be totally on the street. And you have to be like a 4-star chef. Basically, I think Action Bronson is the only person who could listen to everything that your Old Droog is saying and follow along. You also have to be like well affiliated with like Slavic culture in America, with Jewish culture. There's like a lot of things. We on the Tarmac opens up with the traditional sounds of a airport. That's my sign language for airport. I don't know what the sign language for airport is, but that's what I would call it. Very atmospheric beat. Again, Wino Willie, some cool sci-fi sounds. Again, really emphasizing this idea of food and poverty. Remember squeezing mayo and mustard on the school fries? Delicious. When I was in school, I loved the tater tots. Actually, right here, I have a half tooth. My teeth are all yellow because I drank too much coffee. But I have a half tooth, and it fell out once when I was eating a tater tot. It's weird. And then he says, pay to see a Droog like Clockwork Orange. Now this is beautiful. Because Droog means friend in most Slavic languages, including Serbo-Croatian. It's also how you would say comrade. So that's important for communists. So Droog is a term which all Slavic people know means either friend or comrade. When Anthony Burgess was writing Clockwork Orange, part of what makes Clockwork Orange interesting is the vocabulary. Because the vocabulary is all messed up. And it's all messed up because it's in a fictional sort of future London where lots of communist slang infiltrates the language. That's why he says vidi instead of watch. And that's why he refers to his friends as Droogs. So, they pay to see a Droog like Clockwork Orange. And of course, Clockwork Orange is directed by Stanley Kubrick. It all comes together. And he says he's at the Laker game with Nicholson, Shining. Again, going into The Shining, and Jack Nicholson, and Kubrick, it all comes together. Next song is 237. Has a quote from someone talking about Captain Beefheart. Cool, like, jazz vocal sample here. Very underwater beat. Roper Williams is the producer. I don't know. Very kind of haunting. Trash rappers try to restore the feeling like physical therapy. That's funny. Chez Noir is on here, despite the fact that she mispronounces Noir in her own name. So I guess that's up to her how she wants to pronounce it. She just has a super strong verse. You know, Chez Noir is one of my favorite rappers from Western New York. I think that Food for Thought, that is going to be in the running for one of the best rap albums of the year. And she's just great. It's great hearing her. She has this funny thing where she talks about putting a rapper in a hole and then she reverses up her flow. You should have a listen. Next song is called Red Rum. Red Rum. It's funny because I was listening to this album this morning with my baby. I have a daughter. She listens to tons of underground hip hop. Her first album was Rock Marciano and Alchemist. But my wife was listening too. You know, she's making some Slavic Christmas bread. So she's working on like orange peels and stuff. If you're Slavic, you know what I'm talking about. It's really good. You think it's just fruitcake, but it's way better. So, you know, we're listening to this album, and then when she hears this song, Red Rum, she's like, oh, it is about The Shining. Because I'd been listening to the album maybe 1.5 times, and she'd been picking up on all these Shining references, but she was like, there's no way he's actually talking about The Shining. And she's like, he is talking about The Shining. So it's really cool that even though she was kind of checked out and doing something else, she was able to pick up all these references. Barely a beat? Seriously, barely a beat. Like, barely. It's like this... I mean, it's good. It's a good beat, but it's barely there. Like, a slight horn is like it. It's really just the voice. Can't wait to put stars around his head like Tony Romo. Or should I say Prescott, catch him at his rest spot. Spin a car, Pat Benatar, hit him with my best shot. Like, again, his cadence and his flow is so good that the idea of the stars around your head like a cartoon, but it's also a reference to the Dallas Cowboys, like Tony Romo, but he's retired, so Dak Prescott, well, he does. He is secretly the best sporting announcer in any sport. Who knew? I didn't like him as a player, but he's the best color analyst in any sport. Tony Romo. Who would guess? But Dak Prescott is now the quarterback for the Cowboys, so, or should I say Prescott, catch him at his rest spot, spin a car, Pat Benatar, hit him with my best shot. A weird 80s reference. The thing I love about your Old Droog is that even though he works in a black art form and he has many black collaborators, he is not afraid to be just so white with his references. Just references which totally show that he's not trying to pretend he is something that he's not. He knows who Pat Benatar is. I know who Pat Benatar is. Now, do most of the people who he'd collaborate with, did they grow up listening to Hit Me With Your Best Shot and know that that's Pat Benatar? Probably not. I really appreciate that it's like the least racist thing you can do is own up to your culture, whatever it is, and acknowledge what it is. You know? I don't know. And then he ends it with the best Shining reference. A Shining reference which probably went over your head. Probably went over your head unless you spent a long time listening to the words of Delbert Grady. People got me effed up. It's time to correct them. In the bathroom scene, the amazing red bathroom scene where Jack Nicholson is hallucinating or talking to a ghost, we don't know, talking to the previous caretaker who butchered his daughters in the hallway. And that's what the image is from. Come play with this, Danny. He talks about how his daughters got out of line, but he says, I corrected them, sir. And he rolls his R's just like that. I corrected them, sir. Listen to the 237 podcast. They really go on and on about how great this actor is and how great that line reading is. But he throws it in there. And again, even if you're a big Shining fan, you might miss that. I corrected them. It's really, really cool. It's awesome. Man, I love The Shining. I love your Old Droog. I love Lamp. The Thagad Fahim has a good verse. There's also this interesting guest appearance by Rockiness Monster, I think he calls himself, who does the chorus. And then it ends, again, just be who you are, you know? Why not have a quote from Artie Lang on the Howard Stern show talking about the Here's Johnny scene? You know, like, there's a couple of, like, references here, interstitial moments, where I'm just like, oh my god. Like, man, who quotes Artie Lang on the Howard Stern show? But talking about how the Here's Johnny line was improvised, gorgeous beat here. and just like a nice xylophone. He makes reference to the Bozak, which I think is the EPMD reference. he talks about having to watch friends like Ross and Rachel. So, it's like kind of, that's fun. That's fine. Like be careful of your friends. And then he says, never watched it. And I'm the same way. I've never watched a single episode of Friends. I hate that show. Okay, I've seen like 30 episodes, but I hated it every single second. I hate Friends. I've never seen it. I've watched probably half the episodes. I'm right there with you. And then at the end, he goes after the Rough Riders and their compilation albums. And that's the other thing, like more than being a Shining nerd or a comedy nerd with Rodney Dangerfield, all that. He's a hip-hop nerd. So, like, the Rough Riders, I saw them in concert in Boston in 2001. But, they had those Ride or Die compilations, and it's true, like there's good songs on them, but most of the tracks aren't that good. So he's got a very specific attack on a very specific rap group. Hey, this video is now longer than the album. Congratulations to me. And then at the very end, he quotes Frank Zappa. At the very end, he quotes Frank Zappa. I forgot that I had this book. In the very end, he quotes Frank Zappa, which is interesting because, Frank Zappa is an amazing artist, and he's really famous for being uncompromising, for just putting out his vision and F you if you don't like it. And really F you if you don't like it. F you with a corn cob if you don't like it. And his music is very complicated, very challenging. The older he got, the more challenging it became. And so it's this whole thing about how my music is for those who like it. And I think it's an important comparison that he's making. I think that Frank Zappa is a great model of an artist. That all artists should be like Zappa, uncompromising in their vision and just delivering what they believe, and whatever anyone else likes is whatever they like. Then leads into the final song, The Hedge Maze, which actually sounds like it might be a sample from the Shining soundtrack. I don't think it is. But still, it's interesting because it has this kind of menacing percussion. It develops nicely. It's produced by Sadhu Gold, who often works with Makami. Just great. It just builds really nicely. Seriously, listen to this, because we have this like droning this droning organ, and then these horns that come in off the edge like Bickle, referring to Travis Bickle from Scorsese, tying together with the previous Casino reference, two different Scorsese references from Taxi Driver there, Travis Bickle. Skinny as a toothpick that had me in a pickle, break the cycle like my old cousin wrecked my tricycle. Just break the cycle of generational abuse, trauma, and poverty, like she failed to do up until the very end. Refers himself as rap rock Mononov, Tchaikovsky, Baroque style, Vivaldi, all these references to classical musicians. I need millions from The Who, like Roger Daltrey. I don't quite understand why he's saying that, but Roger Daltrey is the lead singer of The Who. I also happen to have a Who biography right here. I'm done, I swear. And then he ends it with these amazing lines. You can only pretend that beef jerky is steak for so long. That's the emotional core of this album, is him reliving his days of poverty, growing up poor in New York, feeling like an outcast, feeling like he's put out by society. And also, it ends the very last lines of the whole album, tie everything back together with The Shining. Got these MFers following my tracks, but they don't see the steps to be the best. I made it out the maze while they freeze to death. This is, of course, a reference to the end of the movie, where Danny, played by Danny Lloyd, Danny Torrance, walks into the hedge maze and then backtracks so that when his father, who's trying to kill him, is following him, he actually, because he backtracks, he's able to escape, and then his murderous father dies in the maze. Okay? So that's the final line to the entire album. And it's amazing placing himself as Danny and other rappers as Jack as they freeze to death. Which brings me up to my one piece of Shining memorabilia. I only have one piece of Shining memorabilia. 1 second. I'm going to turn this back on. Here, you want to see the rinds that she's cooking? Check this out. That's going to be good. This is my one piece of Shining memorabilia. It's a cell from The Shining with The Simpsons. So you got Homer chasing the family into the hedge maze. So there you go. Thank you, your Old Droog, for such a great Christmas gift. Thank you to the 237 podcast. Thank you to Stanley Kubrick. And thank you to you for watching all the way through to the end. There's the camera.